Aarav, Radhika, and Sushma Mehta seemed like an ordinary Indian family, living peacefully in the suburbs of Austin, Texas. But behind closed doors, a shocking web of secrets, betrayal, and deception was quietly unraveling, threatening to destroy everything they had worked so hard to build. Please subscribe for daily new update of crime story and watch till end. Aarav Mehta and his wife Radhika had always imagined that moving to the United States would mark the beginning of a peaceful and stable life. After years of careful planning, saving and waiting for approvals, they finally arrived in Austin, Texas. The city welcomed them with quiet streets, warm sunlight, and a calm environment that felt far simpler than their busy lives in Pune. They rented a modest suburban home with a small backyard, enough space for evening tea and weekend barbecues. Aarav began working as a software engineer, while Radhika took a job at a local community center. Everything felt new yet comforting, and for the first time, they sensed a future untouched by stress or family interference. In the early months, the couple settled into a routine that felt almost ideal. They cooked together, explored nearby parks, and even made friends with a few Indian families in the neighborhood. Their days flowed smoothly, free from the constant noise and obligations they had grown up with in India. They believed they had finally found the peaceful life they always wanted. But then came the phone call that altered everything. Aarav's mother, Sushma, was struggling emotionally after living alone in Pune for months. Aarav felt guilty and suggested she come stay with them for a while. Radhika agreed, hoping the presence of family would add warmth to their new home. When Sushma arrived, the first few days passed pleasantly. She praised the house, admired the neighborhood, expressed pride in how well her son and daughter-in-law had settled abroad. Aarav felt relieved, and Radhika tried her best to make Sushma comfortable. But gradually, small things began to shift. Radhika sensed that the atmosphere in the home felt heavier, as if an unseen pressure had entered with Sushma's luggage. It wasn't anything dramatic, just subtle changes that grew noticeable with time. Sushma would quietly roam the house, sometimes opening cupboards, sometimes rearranging things without mentioning why. She would appear behind Radhika unexpectedly, watching her cook or clean with an expression Radhika couldn't read. Late at night, footsteps echoed softly in the hallway, even though Aarav slept deeply and Radhika stayed in bed. She tried to ignore it at first, convincing herself it was just adjustment for all of them. Yet the feeling lingered, a quiet discomfort that only grew stronger. Despite her unease, Radhika reminded herself that families needed patience. She continued her daily routines, but her mind remained alert, noticing every small shift in Sushma's behavior. Items moved from their usual places, drawers left slightly open, and the faint sense that someone had been in their bedroom during the day when they were at work. Aarav dismissed it as harmless habits, believing his mother simply needed time to settle in a different country. But Radhika knew something was off, something silent, slow, and unsettling. What had begun as a hopeful new life in the USA was slowly changing, and the peace they had built was slipping away without either of them realizing how deeply it would affect their future. Radhika tried to ignore the tension she felt, telling herself that every family went through phases of adjustment. But the uneasiness growing inside her refused to settle. Each morning, she noticed some small change in the house that she could not explain. A stack of papers that she left neatly arranged on the study table appeared disturbed. A kitchen container she used daily shifted to an unfamiliar corner. A scented candle she kept near the living room window had been moved to the bedroom dresser without her knowledge. These were not accidents, they were deliberate movements, yet there was never any sign of why they happened or who did them. Sushma behaved as if nothing unusual was happening around her. She spent long hours sitting near the window, staring outside at the empty street or talking to relatives in India on her phone in hushed tones. Sometimes Radhika found her lingering in Aarav's study room, simply looking at shelves or touching files before stepping away quietly. Every time Radhika entered a room unexpectedly, Sushma acted startled, as if she had been caught doing something she shouldn't. The silence that followed those moments was always thick and uncomfortable. Aarav remained unaware of these encounters, assuming that daily routines kept everyone busy. At night, the unease deepened. Radhika often woke up with the odd sense of being watched. The hallway light would be on, even though she always switched it off before sleeping. She heard faint movements outside their bedroom, soft enough to question, but clear enough to disturb her rest. Once, she stepped out just in time to see a shadow moving toward the guest room, disappearing before she could identify who it was. She tried telling herself she was imagining things, but the repeated occurrences made it impossible to dismiss. One evening, when she came home early from work, she found Sushma in the master bedroom. The almirah door stood open, and Sushma was sorting through Radhika's clothes with complete calmness. When Radhika entered the room, Sushma simply walked away without any explanation. That moment stayed with Radhika for days. It felt like a boundary had been crossed, one that she didn't know how to address without causing conflict. Aarav listened politely when she mentioned it later, but he believed his mother must have been looking for something harmless. Radhika knew this was not the case, but she also knew pushing too hard would create tension with both of them. In the following days, the strangeness around the house only intensified. A locked drawer in the study appeared slightly ajar, though only Aarav had the key. An important envelope Radhika had placed on the table vanished for 2 days, and then reappeared in the kitchen drawer. Her personal diary, which she kept hidden inside a suitcase, had been moved and placed neatly on the bed as if someone wanted her to notice. The pattern was clear. Someone was deliberately entering private spaces and leaving silent hints behind. Radhika felt the quiet walls of the home closing in on her. The sense of safety she once felt had faded, replaced by a slow creeping fear that something was happening behind her back, something she could not yet explain. The unsettling truth was becoming harder to ignore, and she could sense that whatever was happening inside their home had only just begun. The tension in the house quietly escalated as days passed. Radhika tried to focus on work and keep her mind occupied, but a growing anxiety followed her everywhere. She felt watched, monitored, as if her actions were no longer her own. Still, she pushed through the discomfort, hoping the situation would settle on its own. But everything changed the morning she checked their emergency fund. It started with a simple routine task. Radhika wanted to update their monthly budget, something she and Aarav did carefully to manage their expenses. When she logged into their joint account, she froze. Nearly $15,000 had disappeared. The withdrawal wasn't gradual, it was taken in 2 large amounts over the past week. Confused and shaken, she refreshed the page multiple times, hoping it was a system error. But the numbers remained unchanged, cold and clear on the screen. Her hands trembled as she checked the transaction history. Each withdrawal had been made from their home computer during times when she and Aarav were both at work. That fact alone made her stomach twist. The only person at home during those hours was Sushma. A wave of disbelief washed over Radhika. Accusing her mother-in-law without proof would create a storm she wasn't ready to face. But the reality in front of her refused to be ignored. She searched their study room, hoping to find some explanation. That was when she discovered something else had gone missing. Several financial documents, including tax papers, account details, and investment summaries. The neatly organized folder she had maintained for years now looked incomplete. Some pages were missing entirely, while others were folded differently, as if someone had hurried through them. The feeling of intrusion overwhelmed her. It wasn't just money anymore. Someone had gone through the most private aspects of their financial life. Overwhelmed, Radhika waited for Aarav to return home and showed him the bank records. Aarav was stunned, pacing across the room in disbelief. He wanted to believe there was a mistake. He called the bank, but they confirmed the withdrawals were authorized with correct login credentials. That meant it wasn't a hack. Someone in the house had done it deliberately. Radhika watched as the realization slowly hit him, his confidence shaken. Still, he hesitated to draw a conclusion. He kept repeating that they needed to think clearly, that there had to be some explanation they weren't seeing. But Radhika's instincts were sharper. Every unsettling moment over the past weeks pointed toward the same person. The late-night movements, the shifting objects, the quiet and secretive behavior. Someone had been waiting for the right moment, watching them long enough to know their routines, their passwords, their habits. She felt a chill run down her spine at the thought of how long the plan had been unfolding without them noticing. Fear crept deeper into the home now. Something hidden had taken root under their roof. Something dangerous, calculated and close. The missing savings were not the end of the mystery. They were only the beginning of a much darker revelation waiting to surface. Radhika could not let the matter rest. The missing money and the disturbed documents were too serious to ignore. While Aarav tried to remain calm and rational, she felt an urgency growing inside her, a feeling that there was a truth hidden in their home that needed to be uncovered. The more she thought about Sushma's strange behaviors, the more she felt compelled to dig deeper. One afternoon, when Sushma went out for a walk as she did each day at the same time, Radhika decided to act. She knew it wasn't right to go through someone's belongings, but something inside her pushed her forward. Answers were needed, and they would not come by waiting. She went to the guest room, where Sushma stayed, and carefully opened the cupboard. Inside the luggage, things were arranged neatly, almost overly organized. Under the folded clothes, Radhika found a set of old envelopes tied together. Her heartbeat quickened as she untied the stack. The first envelope contained copies of old identification documents, some with names slightly different from the ones she knew. Another envelope held handwritten letters that looked worn out from age. The ink faded but still legible. They spoke of debts, threats, and demands for repayment. The language was emotional, desperate, and filled with fear. The most disturbing document lay at the bottom. A court notice issued years ago in Pune. It mentioned an unresolved case involving financial fraud, manipulation of relatives, and undisclosed assets. The name on the notice matched Sushma's. Radhika felt her breath catch. This was not a misunderstanding. This was a past life filled with secrets, carefully hidden from Aarav and everyone else. She read the details again, each line tightening the knot in her stomach. The notice described accusations made by extended family members who claimed they had been tricked into giving money under false promises. The case had stayed pending because the accused disappeared before the inquiry advanced. A heavy realization sank in. The behaviors she had noticed, the silent movements, the rearranged items, the constant phone calls were not harmless quirks or cultural misunderstandings. They were traces of a pattern, one that had followed Sushma across continents. Radhika began connecting the dots. Someone with a history of manipulating family finances, someone who had faced legal trouble for fraud, someone who suddenly appeared restless and certicky in a new environment. It all aligned too perfectly. But the discovery brought a deeper fear. If Sushma had hidden such an important part of her life, what else was she hiding? And how far was she willing to go to protect herself from the consequences of her past? Radhika felt a sudden need to leave the room, as if the air itself had grown heavy. She placed everything back exactly as she found it and closed the cupboard quietly. Her hands were cold, her pulse unsteady. As she walked back to the living room, she felt a sense of danger mixed with clarity. Their peaceful home had never been peaceful, not truly. A storm had been living in their guest room, disguised under polite smiles and soft words. The secrets she uncovered today were not random fragments. They were pieces of a larger puzzle, one that was slowly revealing a truth far more unsettling than she had imagined. The past Radhika had discovered was not staying in the past. It was creeping into their present, threatening to shatter everything they had built. Priya Ahuja lived just 2 houses away, and often crossed paths with Radhika during evening walks. She was friendly, observant, and well-connected within the neighborhood. One afternoon, when Priya casually mentioned something she had seen earlier in the week, Radhika felt a tremor ripple through her chest. Priya explained that she had noticed Sushma meeting a stranger near the community mailboxes, someone she had never seen before in their quiet, familiar neighborhood. The man was dressed plainly, carrying a small envelope, and kept glancing around nervously, as if afraid of being watched. What unsettled Priya most was that Sushma seemed equally uneasy, constantly looking over her shoulder before accepting the envelope. The encounter was brief, but suspicious enough that Priya felt the need to mention it. As Priya shared more details, Radhika felt a chill. The meeting had taken place around the same days when the money disappeared from their account. Sushma had behaved strangely after returning from her walk that day, claiming she was tired and wanted to rest. Now the timing aligned too perfectly. Priya, sensing Radhika's discomfort, hesitated before adding that she had also seen Sushma discard something in the community trash bin shortly after the meeting, something wrapped hastily in a newspaper. Priya hadn't checked what it was at the time, but looking back, she wished she had. After Priya left, Radhika stood near her window, staring at the quiet street, trying to process everything. The neighborhood looked peaceful as always, children cycling on the sidewalk, families returning from groceries, and dogs barking playfully. But beneath that calm exterior lay a truth she was now close to uncovering. The stranger, the envelope, the hurried disposal, it all pointed to a hidden connection, one that involved secrecy, fear, and perhaps danger. That evening, Radhika checked the community trash bin before the garbage truck arrived. She carefully searched through the bags, her heart pounding with every rustle. Finally, she found a crumpled newspaper bundle tied with a thin string. Inside it, she discovered scraps of paper, torn letters, bank slips, and an unfamiliar phone number scribbled on a piece of cardboard. One slip included a partial account detail that wasn't theirs. Another piece mentioned a deadline and an amount of money. The scattered words formed a frightening pattern. Someone was demanding repayment, and Sushma was desperate enough to meet them secretly. When she returned home, her mind was spinning. What scared her most was the thought that Sushma might not be acting alone. The involvement of an unknown man meant the situation was far more complicated than a simple misuse of their funds. There was a network, or at least a partnership, driving these actions. Sushma's anxiety, her secretive phone calls, her silent movements inside the house, they all made disturbing sense now. Radhika knew Aarav needed to hear the truth, but she also knew that sharing this information would shake him deeply. He still clung to the belief that his mother was simply adjusting, not sinking into old patterns or dangerous connections. Yet Radhika could no longer ignore the evidence piling up around her. Their home, once a sanctuary of peace, now felt like the center of a hidden web woven by desperation and secrets. Every new discovery hinted at deeper trouble. It was becoming clear that the stranger was not just a random visitor. He represented a threat that had followed Sushma across the world, and now lurked in the shadows of their quiet American neighborhood. The alarm pierced through the silence of the night, jolting Radhika awake with a shock that sent her heart racing. For a moment, she couldn't move. The shrill sound seemed to vibrate through the walls, shaking her senses awake. Aarav rushed out of bed, and Radhika followed him, both trembling with confusion and fear. As they stepped into the hallway, they froze at the sight before them. Drawers were open, cupboard doors stood wide, and belongings lay scattered across the floor as if someone had searched the house in a panic. Shoes, bags, documents, and clothing had been thrown around in a messy, chaotic trail that led through the living room and kitchen. Aarav immediately checked the main door and windows. Everything was locked from the inside. Nothing was broken, not even a scratch on the frames. It made no sense. The alarm had been triggered manually, not by forced entry. Radhika's eyes traveled across the room, absorbing every detail. This wasn't the work of a thief. It looked staged, deliberate, rushed, and strangely selective. Some items had not been touched at all, while others appeared carefully rearranged to create the illusion of a break-in. When the police arrived, they inspected the house thoroughly. They checked every door, window, and possible point of entry, but found no signs of tampering. Their questions were direct but puzzled. Had anyone in the house possibly triggered the alarm from inside? Aarav denied it with certainty. Radhika watched silently, her mind racing. She couldn't stop herself from noticing how calm and unconcerned Sushma appeared as she stood in the corner, observing everything with an expression that revealed nothing. She didn't look frightened or confused, just distant, almost calculating. The officers asked if anything valuable was missing. Aarav checked quickly and found that nothing of major worth seemed to be gone. But Radhika noticed something different. A few personal items had been moved in specific ways that didn't align with panic or theft. A small safe under their bed, previously untouched, lay slightly open. It contained nothing valuable, only passports and old documents. But someone had looked through it. The drawers in the study were open in a pattern she recognized. The same pattern she had seen on days when she suspected someone had gone through their papers. As the officers left, advising them to stay alert and call again if anything suspicious occurred, the house fell into a heavy silence. Aarav seemed overwhelmed, trying to make sense of the chaos, but unable to form a clear explanation. Radhika felt a tightness in her chest as she examined the scattered items once more. This was not the work of an external intruder. It was a performance, a distraction, a setup meant to confuse them. And the person responsible was someone who had access to every room, every drawer and any detail of their daily lives. The realization settled in her mind with a chill she could not brush off. Someone inside the house wanted to create fear and uncertainty, perhaps to shift suspicion, perhaps to cover their own actions. The staged break-in was not a random event. It was a message. Someone was growing desperate. Radhika could no longer deny what her instincts had been warning her for weeks. The danger was not outside their home, it was living quietly under the same roof, moving through their rooms in the dark, and manipulating their lives with every passing day. The tension in the house reached a breaking point, though Aarav still clung to the hope that there might be a simple explanation for the strange events. Radhika, however, could no longer suppress the mounting evidence that had built up over weeks. The missing money, the secretive movements, the hidden documents, the staged break-in, and now the mysterious envelope discovered by Priya, all of it pointed to one uncomfortable truth. Sushma had been hiding something significant, something that directly affected their lives. The weight of the discoveries pressed heavily on Radhika's mind as she prepared to confront the situation more directly. That evening, when Sushma was alone in the living room, Radhika finally gathered the courage to observe her closely. There was a tension in her posture, a flicker of unease that betrayed a fear she tried to mask behind calm expressions. Every subtle gesture, the way she held the envelope she carried, the way her eyes darted toward the door whenever Aarav entered the room, spoke of hidden intentions. Radhika's suspicions crystallized. Sushma had been acting deliberately, and the truth could no longer remain buried. She realized that Sushma had been planning to manipulate their household and their resources all along. Later that night, the hidden connections became clear. Radhika discovered notes and messages hidden among Sushma's personal belongings, emails printed on scraps of paper, vague instructions, and a series of bank references linked to an account neither Aarav nor Radhika recognized. The messages revealed communication with an unknown man demanding money, pressing for repayment of debts from years ago. The urgency and tone in the notes were aggressive, leaving little doubt that Sushma had felt threatened. She had panicked, taking the emergency fund to meet his demands, hoping that Aarav and Radhika would never discover her actions. The staged break-in now made sense. It was a desperate move to create confusion and delay any investigation into the missing money. By scattering belongings and activating the alarm, Sushma sought to disguise her withdrawals as the work of an external intruder. Her plan had relied on fear and distraction to keep the couple from noticing the exact timing and source of the transactions. It was calculated, manipulative, and precise. Radhika felt a combination of fear and anger. The realization that Sushma had put them at risk and betrayed their trust was painful. The woman they had welcomed into their home with kindness had taken advantage of their hospitality and goodwill. Her past, which included unresolved legal troubles and manipulations in India, had followed her across continents, influencing her actions in their home. It was no longer a matter of misunderstanding, it was a deliberate betrayal. Knowing the truth, Radhika prepared to involve Aarav fully. Together, they confronted the situation with clarity and resolve. The next step was inevitable. Legal authorities needed to be informed to prevent further escalation. Sushma's admission, once extracted, confirmed everything. The withdrawals, the secret communications, and the staged alarm. She had acted out of fear, desperation, and a desire to hide past mistakes, but the consequences were now unavoidable. Their home, once a sanctuary, had become a stage for a dangerous plan that threatened not only their finances but their sense of safety and trust. Radhika and Aarav realized that the revelations would change everything. They had survived deception within their own family, and while the emotional impact was profound, uncovering the truth allowed them to take back control of their lives. The danger lurking behind closed doors was finally exposed. The following days after Sushma's admission were a blur of police reports, bank statements, and legal appointments. Aarav and Radhika felt a strange mixture of relief and exhaustion. Relief, because the truth had finally come to light and they were no longer left guessing about the missing money and the strange occurrences in their home. Exhaustion, because the betrayal had been closer and deeper than they ever imagined. The home that had once symbolized hope and a fresh start now carried the weight of deception and distrust. Each corner, each room, reminded them of the quiet chaos that had been orchestrated under their very roof. Authorities took the matter seriously, as the case involved fraudulent withdrawals, deception, and threats. Sushma was taken into custody while the investigation began in full. Her actions, influenced by past debts and secret communications, were scrutinized carefully. The police also contacted the bank and traced the flow of money, ensuring that no further transfers could be made to the unknown man demanding repayment. While the legal process unfolded, Aarav and Radhika faced the delicate task of rebuilding their lives while dealing with the emotional fallout of betrayal from someone they had trusted implicitly. Neighbors and friends soon learned about the scandal, and the quiet Austin community was shaken. What had seemed like a peaceful, ordinary family now became a story, whispered in conversations, a cautionary tale for others. Priya Ahuja, who had first noticed Sushma's secretive meetings, received calls from concerned neighbors asking for her observations. Though difficult, Radhika felt a sense of validation. The pieces of the puzzle she had quietly gathered made sense to the authorities, and her vigilance had helped uncover a truth that might have otherwise remained hidden. Her patience, observation, and courage had prevented the situation from escalating further. Aarav and Radhika began the slow process of regaining normalcy. They resecured their finances, changed passwords, and implemented strict boundaries within their home. Each step toward security also became a step toward healing. Despite the lingering discomfort, they felt empowered by the knowledge that they were now in control of their lives again. Their relationship, tested by the ordeal, grew stronger, forged by trust and shared resilience. The experience left them with lessons that would remain for life. They understood that appearances could be deceiving, that danger could quietly hide behind familiar faces, and that vigilance was essential even within one's own home. The peace they had sought in America was not entirely lost, but it had to be rebuilt carefully, brick by brick, with awareness and care. Though the scandal shook their world, Aarav and Radhika emerged stronger and wiser. Sushma's actions, once threatening and destructive, became a part of their story of endurance and recovery. Behind the closed doors of their home, the darkness had been exposed, and the family could finally reclaim their space, their trust, and their peace. They understood that sometimes the hardest trials come from within, but facing the truth head-on allowed them to move forward with clarity and courage, ready to rebuild the life they had always dreamed of in a new country.